Welcome to the Michele Roy Show.
Hello and welcome to another Michele Roy Show. Today I'm so honored to have an amazing guest with me. Dr. Susanna Petche is redefining trauma care and a leading movement for change. Founder of Trauma Sense and creator of the C-Sense methodology, she blends neuroscience, functional medicine, and coaching to address the hidden effects of trauma. With 25 years plus experience in GP, she sees how unresolved trauma fuels many health issues, inspiring her to create training, resources for professionals, workplaces, and individuals. Her recent TEDx talk is Trauma Costing Your Future, highlights the often unseen connection between trauma, behavior, and health, and a clarion for call of change. She's a sought-after speaker. She has shared stages with Dr. Gabriel Mate, Dr. Stephen Porges, and Rangan Chatterjee, and has worked with organizations including the Royal College of Surgeons. Her work is transforming the way of healthcare and culture approach trauma, bringing about lasting change. Dr. Susanna, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Michele.
I'm delighted to have you here. Actually, let's start from telling us, where are you based right now, and where did you grow up?
So I'm based on the south coast of England in a town called Brighton, and I grew up about an hour and a half away from here in a little town in Hampshire.
Nice, lovely.
Yeah,
That's good. I think Brighton is such a nice little city.
yeah, it's
Beach.
gorgeous. It's beautiful being by the sea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this whole life, dealing with trauma and really actually making a movement on this topic? And could you just
Mm.
explain a little bit your background?
Yeah, so I'm a GP by training, so I studied medicine. Having always been interested in medicine, like I wanted to be a doctor since I was 5, and I've been fascinated by how the body works, but in particular how I've always had a fascination with how we think and how we can influence how we can think and how that impacts on our behavior and our health. And I've just kind of had this interest, but not really seen how it all linked together. It's kind of funny how you can look back and see things.
Mm,
And I've always been drawn towards mental health. I've always questioned how we look at mental health, even from when I was a medical student.
mm,
And I helped set up mental health services. I lived for a few years in Australia, so I helped set up services there where we lived, and in the UK. And so I thought I really understood mental health. That was kind of my thing.
yeah.
And um, and and I've had many times through my adult life been told that I have depression. I've been on antidepressants many times, seen lots of different therapists, and everything kind of helped a bit, like enough to get me to manage. But
Mm,
I kind of just thought, okay, that's just how it is because that's what I've been taught. And then 10 years ago, I became really unwell and completely fell apart and couldn't work for 6 months.
mm,
And at that point, I met a therapist that I'm so grateful that I kind of came across her. And she was the first person who said, actually, I don't think you have depression. I think you've got post-traumatic stress disorder.
mm,
And then it turned out I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And this was the first time that I'd heard that term trauma in relation to me. So I'd always learnt about trauma being something to do, like a big thing, particularly in war or combat,
mm,
and not anything in relation to what I'd experienced. And I mean, it was really shocking to hear that, because it really changed the whole view I had of medicine, of mental health, of all of my training, not just at medical school, but ongoing training, how I'd managed patients.
mm.
So it led me to try and understand more because, to be honest, I didn't really believe it to start
Okay.
with. So I ended up doing a master's in trauma to try and learn about it and almost to discredit, not discredit, but kind of to prove to my therapist that she kind of wasn't right, really. Um, and and I found all of this research. And I could not believe that there is so much evidence and research out there about what trauma is,
Mm.
um, how it changes every cell in our body, and how we can heal from it. And none of this is kind of like hypothetical, just that people are thinking about it, possible things that are happening. This is actually evidence-based. We can see it on scans, on blood tests. Like there's things that we can see. So it's not that we can do a blood test to see it, but we can see evidence of inflammation as a result of trauma. And the fact that we'd still, even though we've got all of this evidence and all of these studies that have been repeated over decades, we're still not learning about this in medical school as a routine. We're still not having this in part of training for coaches and wellbeing professionals.
Mm.
That's what really makes me want to change this. And so that's what my business is about doing teaching and training for coaches and for other healthcare professionals and doctors.
Well, it's a very amazing work that you took it on. The fact that you did it just as well to say like, oh, is it really true? Let me try this, go for a master. But I think it's opening so many doors because it is true. A lot of times we're judged just by the appearance or if somebody comes in. I'm sure you've seen lots of clients as well that come in
Mm,
saying that they have this pain or that pain and you can't really find why did they have it. But they're always like, oh, it's all in your head. But actually, no. Sometimes there's something else, like you're saying, the trauma that had been
yeah.
stored there, like you're saying, the cellular level. I was very fortunate to meet you in person at the TEDx when you were doing your speech, and I think it was a phenomenal speech. So I said, it's just I love the way that you have shared so vulnerably about your story, but also to show and highlight to others that there is a way. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I really love to explore more.
Yeah.
We don't have to
Yeah.
be stuck on our own problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that point that you said about things not being visible is really important because I think there's one of the things that I think is so difficult with mental health and particularly within that trauma field that it's because of how trauma works and how it impacts us. One of the coping mechanisms or survival mechanisms that we have is to be able to function with normal life. So we kind of push that part that was traumatized away and just kind of as a survival mechanism just carry on and cope. And whilst that worked at the time, over as the months and years pass, that becomes then harder and harder to kind of keep that pushed away. And that's one of the things that I really noticed that when I was much younger, I was able to mask much more easily. But then it got to a point that was then that tipping point 10 years ago where I just couldn't function.
Mm.
And so on the outside, I'd look like, I was on the executive board of a clinical commissioning group. I had a mortgage, I had kids, I looked like I was really thriving, but
Mm.
no one knew what the cost of that was behind closed doors and how much I was really struggling. And that's where I think we have this perception of people who are really struggling with trauma
Mm.
are obviously broken. And
Mm.
firstly, we're not broken. We're having normal responses to completely abnormal situations that can be healed. And most of the time, we're just so used to hiding it and masking it. And it's that those people who are outwardly looking like they're functioning, but really struggling on the inside. That's what I really want to highlight. And there's so much, like you say, there's so much we can do to help.
Yeah. And could you explain a little bit about what trauma is in a general sense for those that are listening?
Yeah, so trauma is essentially where, like I said, it's that normal response to an abnormal situation. So
Mm.
when we are threatened, when we particularly that's that real life threat, then our bodies respond in certain ways to keep us alive so that we survive. And that's normal. That's how we're supposed to respond. If we didn't have those survival responses, you and I wouldn't be here. But it's
Probably.
when we get stuck in that,
Mm.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so what is a traumatic event? I mean, there's some things that are really clearly, obviously a traumatic event. You know, if we're in a hostage situation, or if you're in a, a refugee in a from a war, or if there's been a terrible accident, like people can understand. Most people can understand that that's a traumatic event. But what people may not really understand is the kind of less obvious, less visible. So things like bullying,
Mm,
and when it's that verbal bullying or cyberbullying, that it's not that visible. And remembering bullying can happen as an adult as well as a child at school. Any kind of abuse, so yes, physical abuse, but also sexual abuse and emotional abuse, neglect, is not visible. And, as an adult, that coercive control, we're hearing more about it now. But it's things that are very difficult to prove. And it's very much, it tends to be one person's word against another.
mm,
And so often, particularly women, are just not believed. And so when they say that something has happened, it's often twisted that a woman is being dramatic and oversensitive and
mm,
making it up, and so that not being believed adds another layer. And so for many people, they just tend to not even speak up because of that fear of not being believed. But so what for one person is traumatic may not necessarily be for another person.
mm.
So we can go through traumatic experience, but not necessarily have really significant consequences that really impact people day to day.
Oh, well, thanks for explaining that. I think that anybody that's listening right now also will find out that there is a way, right? There is a way out of this. It can be gloom and doom.
Absolutely.
But definitely the awareness of it, I guess, it is difficult. And even to speak up, like you were saying there, it's not easy because you will question yourselves. Like I know for myself, I've been sexually abused as a child, and so I have a lot of trauma that I feel that's what happened to me as well. That my body said enough is enough and crashed itself,
Yeah,
7 years
yeah,
ago. And it's been a slow unraveling, I'll say very slow, but and
yeah.
I'm still at it, I'm still at it. But I came to understand a lot more about myself than I had before. And I would love to hear from you about the methodology that you developed there with the C sense, if you can explain that.
Yeah, so I think the thing to remember is that healing really is possible. And I would never say that there's like an end point that
Mm,
we can say like we're fixed. I don't feel that we're broken, and I don't think we need kind of fixing, but it's how to get to a point where whatever happened doesn't overwhelm us, doesn't take over our life, so that we're able to function in the way that we want to, and to really thrive at life and really enjoy life, and reach the potential, whatever that is for each individual. The problem is that the kind of current government recommendations that we have. So in the UK, it's the NICE recommendation, so National Institute of Clinical Education Evidence. Um, it's really just medication and talking therapy.
mm,
And for a lot of people, talking about trauma, it just re-traumatizes. Like for some people, talking therapy can be incredibly helpful and very validating. And sometimes it can be a really helpful place to start. So to be able to speak what happened and have someone really hear and validate that can be really helpful.
mm,
But trauma, as we've said, it's held in our bodies, in our cells, in our tissues. And so we can't kind of talk our way out of that.
mm,
And so it's looking at what we can do in addition to talking therapies, or even instead of. And so that's where I developed this C sense methodology, where the letter C stands for curiosity and compassion. And so it's about viewing ourselves, our responses, our reactions with that curiosity and with that kindness, that compassion that we automatically have for other people, that we also shine that on ourselves. There's so much shame with trauma. that
Mm,
it can be really hard to be kind and compassionate to ourselves. And that I believe is really the key that's just really
mm,
important. So the first S stands for safety, and that's about n noticing where we feel safe. And
mm,
it's not about judging that. It's not about kind of that often that internal voice or even externally people saying, well, of course you're safe in this environment. You know, whatever happened a long time ago. Of course you should feel safe. It's about that bringing curiosity to how we feel internally.
mm,
And rather than kind of that blame, it's just that, oh, okay, that's interesting that in this environment, with these sounds, with these people, with this time of the month, I feel like this. And just bringing an awareness to that and noticing how we feel safe. So where safety feels more kind of expansive, where when we feel threatened and scared, and fearful, we kind of there tends to be a kind of a constriction and a tightening. And just noticing that and trying to incorporate then more time in our day, in our week, where we have that sense of expansiveness, even if it's tiny moments.
mm,
The E is for embodiment. So that point again that trauma just is held in the body. And so just again, bringing that awareness, that curiosity of where do I notice tightness in my body? How can I release that in some way? Like, is it just literally noticing it and trying to let that kind of imagine that kind of coming out?
mm.
Is it literally shaking it, like having, shaking it out of our bodies? Is it doing something more physical like dance? Like I remember you saying you love to dance.
Yeah.
For me, I love drumming. So it's about doing something physical to just discharge that energy. And then doing things like breath work or meditation that can then help calm our nervous systems.
Mm,
Um, the N is for nourishment, and that nourishment, like we tend to think of, we need to eat well, we need to eat lots of vegetables, which, yes, is important, but eating is far more than that. It's about how do we really enjoy eating? How do we bring a sense of real kind of ritual of, eating from a nice plate, having cutlery that makes us feel good in our hands and when we put it in our mouth?
mm,
Do we create a space or do we just kind of eat standing up and rushing while we're still working? Do we chew our food thoroughly? Are we having things that look really appetizing on a plate? And it's also then about nourishing what we, what we're drinking, other things that we're putting into our body, and also thinking about our body as a whole. So nourishing our body in terms of creativity, seeing beautiful things, doing creative things such as, in terms of art and culture, and nourishing our body in terms of sleep and rest, because we're in a culture where, being busy is just glorified. So it's
yeah.
about really having that space to honor that the need for sleep and rest. The second S is for structure, um, because having predictability and routine and structure really helps calm our nervous systems.
Mm,
It helps create a sense of safety for us. And that structure is also to do with boundaries. So noticing where our internal boundaries are, our boundaries are with people, and just being curious about that. Again, with all of these things, it's about bringing curiosity, noticing without judgment, and
mm,
instead bringing compassion to that. And the final E is environment. So it's being aware of our environment, whether it's at home, where we sleep, where we work, has an impact on our mood and how we feel and how we are. And the external environment, being outside, being in nature, how that is really nourishing and healing in itself. So it's all of these things together, held within that bubble of curiosity and compassion.
yeah, curiosity, compassion is such a powerful point because you do have to be curious to keep looking for different
Mm.
solutions, different ways, and curious with yourself as well. What are the feelings? What am I feeling? How am I feeling? What does this bring up to me? And asking those questions, which is stopping, reflecting, and going inside, right? Then instead of just moving out. But I want you to talk a little bit about how you embodied. You mentioned there about drumming. How did you get into that? And how did it help you?
Yeah, so the first the first time I'd really heard about that, excuse me, was reading the book by Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score. And
Mm,
that was where I first really read about the movement and dancing and rhythms. And it's something that it's interesting what we can sometimes intuitively do. So I've actually been doing yoga since I was 16. I used to, when I was a student, always go clubbing, go dancing, because that was just, I felt such a release. And sometimes just go on my own. I just go to a club that was really cheap, that I could go to and just dance for a couple of hours and then kind of go home again. Um, and so yeah, I when I was so this was 10 years ago when I was really unwell, and I came across the book The Body Keeps the Score. And it just really opened my eyes to that idea of rhythm
mm,
and the healing power of that. And then I was in a park in this little kind of local festival, where my two girls were doing a had done a little dance show, and I saw this drumming group, this samba reggae group playing, and
mm.
I was just completely drawn by the rhythms, and ran after them and said, like, how do I get to join and be in your band? Um, and so yeah, so I've been nearly 10 years playing with this particular group. And what's so for me so special about the drumming is that yes, there's the rhythms, but there's
Mm,
also then with the drums the vibration that really feel through the body.
mm.
There's that kind of cathartic nature of really hitting something really hard.
Yeah.
We have choreography with it, so it's really moving the body. And because we're doing it as a group, there's that sense of community, of being with other people, that we're creating something that is bigger than just us. And it's totally fine to make mistakes. I mean, obviously, try not to, but it's that joy of doing something that you get it wrong, it doesn't matter, you smile, you're kind of in a group. So there's that, it really brings kind of joy
Mm,
as well, which is I think so lacking. And I think it's
yeah.
something that particularly with a history of trauma, our relationship to joy and pleasure can be really difficult. So finding things that we can just enjoy just for the sake of it, that doesn't have a purpose of, needing to get an outcome of, to do with work or to do with income or whatever it is. It's just because we enjoy doing it. That's
Yeah.
something really important.
Yeah, for me, that's what I found with Latin dancing as well. It's just the rhythm, the movement can just transport me completely. And the community, because people are always
Yeah.
smiling and laughing and happy. And, we make a mistake, just laugh out of it and just keep
Yeah.
going. Or it does, it doesn't really matter. But you're going to go to Brazil to do this drumming session there. Can you talk a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, I'm so lucky that I get to do this.
Yes,
So
you are.
yeah, I know. So yeah, I'm going next week. Can't believe it.
Wow.
So yeah, very lucky. So the amazing person who founded the drumming group that I'm in, there's lots of kind of groups that have formed as a result of that. So there's lots of these groups now all over the world.
Mm,
And he's from Brazil, and he is also the musical director of Afroco Band in Salvador. So we can play in the Carnival
wow.
um, with them, which is such an incredible honor, such a privilege to be part of that.
Wow.
And it's just such an incredible time to be in Salvador. So this is the third time that I'm going.
Wow. That's
Um,
amazing.
and what I love about it is that during this time, like leading up to Carnival, there's just music everywhere, and there's just such a sense of being present. Like people
Mm,
are just like really enjoying that present moment of, you can see clearly there is poverty everywhere. Like it's not hidden,
mm.
but there's this, okay, there's music, let's just dance.
That's
And it's
it.
that joy of it, that real like being in the moment joyousness of just hearing movement, hearing rhythms, and just dancing and having fun with it. That it's just, yeah, it's so healing and nourishing and
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the things I would love for the listeners to take away, to find a way that they can not only understand trauma, but release it, find something that they can do that's therapeutical and nourishing for the soul, that brings them joy, that brings them that sense of aliveness, this sense of being present, because it is transformative. And it's such an amazing thing that you get to do as well, because it's not only you're expressing you're healing through music, but you're also helping
Yeah.
other people through this. You're creating music, you're creating that part of, you're part of a group that's doing this, which makes a big difference for others as well. So well done. I hope you enjoy it for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the thing that just kind of to add with this, what this highlights is healing trauma doesn't need to be so heavy. I think
Mm,
when we talk about trauma, it can always be like, oh, it's trauma and it's like really heavy and it needs to be really serious.
mm,
When obviously it's serious and important, but there's also ways of working with trauma and healing from trauma that can be fun and bring lightness to it. I think we have so much, there's been so much grief and heaviness that,
mm.
yeah, it's just bringing some lightness and fun into it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I really enjoyed that. And I'm actually going to be linking your TEDx to the show notes, because I think it's something that people should really listen to as well, aside from this, of course. But for both of them, because you're doing such an amazing work, and I sincerely say this to you, Dr. Susanna, just the way that you are helping change narrative, creating a movement, and helping other people, and particularly the professionals, to understand us, normal
Mm.
human beings here. And I think it speaks so much louder because we're not seen most of the time. We're dismissed. And I'm,
Yeah.
I'm sure you even faced that as well, being a doctor, understanding that. But there is that gaslighting that happens. So the fact that you're speaking up, you understand, you're one of, the peers, and you're educating them, kudos to you. I'm well done. Amazing.
Thank you.
And continue doing it, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So yeah, I would love to hear from people and yeah, continue this conversation. So I'm on Instagram and on LinkedIn as Dr. Susanna Petche. So I would, yeah, love to hear from people.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll have that linked in the show notes as well. And
Thank you.
before we finish, what is something that, if you put it in a word or a sentence, that you would like to leave with the listeners?
I think it's just repeating one of the things that I've already said, that if you're if you feel that you're struggling with the impacts of trauma, you're not broken,
Mm.
and it's absolutely possible to heal.
Yeah. Amen. That's very encouraging. There is a way out. We can do
Yeah.
this. I think that's so powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Susanna. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for not only changing the world right now and creating this movement, but being available for others as well and leading the way. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. And everyone that's listening, please do get in touch. Let us know how you feel. How
Mm.
are you trying to get rid of trauma in your life and heal yourself? And most of all, how you're finding joy. We would love to hear from you. Please do get in touch with Dr. Susanna Petche as well. And I'll be putting all of those in the show notes. And until next week, may God bless and keep you. Bye for now.
This was the Michele Roy Show.